Hello and welcome to the new BTA On-Demand Managed IT Services Workshop. You've arrived at the introduction and content overview session, so let's get started. It's good to have you here. My name is Chris Ryan of Growth Achievement Partners. I will be your host and tour guide for the sessions, as well as the Ask Me Anything session at the end. Just a little bit about me and Growth Achievement Partners. It was founded in 2010 with the charter of supporting independent office equipment dealers and their growth and journey towards building a managed services business within a business. Both my co-founding partner and I had a background in the office equipment space for a number of years. I was a quota carrying office equipment rep. I moved into a manager of professional services role and built a team at the time selling professional services and document management and scanning and those types of things, and helping traditional office equipment reps transition into selling more solutions and the types of things that were available at the time. But we co-founded GAP in 2010 specifically to look to help office equipment dealers like you build and have success with managed services businesses within the business, and had a lot of success with that. I've been very fortunate to also host this BTA session since 2010. We've done it as front runners to BTA regional events. We've done it as a classroom workshop. In COVID, we turned it to a virtual session where we did these 5 sessions that I'm going to record on behalf of the group, and it went very well. But at this point, I wanted to record them and have them be on demand. I just thought it was appropriate and useful, and ultimately and hopefully beneficial to the BTA community. So today, Growth Achievement Partners is a consultancy that's really focused on 3 things. The primary one, as I mentioned before, is helping office equipment dealers with managed IT services. We run a consultancy and peer group that focuses on specifically helping those groups. We act as a geographically independent peer group, so there's a lot of sharing, a lot of collaboration. Most of you are likely in dealer peer groups or certainly have familiarity with that, so we run the consultancy and peer group like that. I've also done a fair amount of MSP M&A on behalf of my clients. Some wanted to buy an MSP to get in, some wanted to expand geographically or continue to expand geographically. So I've got a couple of dozen deals that I've helped with, mostly on the buy side, increasingly on the sell side. And then I do some MSP exit planning as well. So I've got familiarity with that group. But about 80% of my time I'm spending specifically with office equipment dealers in a variety of capacities. So it's great to have you here, and I look forward to sharing knowledge, tools, materials, resources, and perspective to help you on your journey. So let's talk a little bit about the workshop and what we're going to cover. It's super comprehensive. What I've really tried to do is curate 13 plus years worth of, as I mentioned, tools, materials, perspective, education, lessons learned, best practices, those types of things, and then try and compartmentalize them into something that that makes sense, but is comprehensive. So you'll see the first session that we'll go through, we'll go over market overview, what's happening in the MSP market and world today, what it means to be an MSP, what's happening in the dealer market, and how that's maybe a little different than the traditional MSP market. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about business model and KPIs, certainly, and then we'll talk about packaging and pricing and go to market and those types of things. Session 2, as you see, we'll really talk about then the team, the structure of the team, partnered environment, what you might do partnered, what you might do yourself, pros and cons, and what that ultimately looks like as you build out your organization. And then operations and service delivery. We've got a lot to learn in delivering service on this side of the business. It's similar, but it's different. So always get asked a lot of questions on operations and service delivery. So we'll have that whole session 2 will be about that. And then we'll move to sales. The sales process here is different. We'll get an understanding of ideal client profile and role clarity and who does what. And then we'll pay special attention to a dedicated managed services sales specialist and a BCIO. Those are different roles. They're different people. There's different attributes. There's different qualities. There's different things that they do in the sales cycle and supporting clients. So we'll get all the way through the sales process and those individuals in particular. Later in session 4, we'll talk a little bit about the traditional copier reps and how we might be able to use them for lead generation and bird dogging, types of activities, things we can do to train them. But we'll also talk about then marketing and list development. So again, kind of rolling through the sessions, we'll get an understanding of the market, the client profile, the types of people that we want to try and sell to, the way in which we're going to deliver service, the people who are going to introduce the services and hopefully start to generate a sales process, and then how we're going to ultimately develop lists to go over and go after and market and do nurturing and those types of things, and then development for the traditional office equipment reps, depending on how you've chosen to have them participate in your program. And then session 5, we're going to cover a lot of other things. It's certainly not the kitchen junk drawer session, but it's things that otherwise kind of didn't fit to the capacity that I would be able to give you a lot of understanding about them in the time and content limitations that we have in these other sessions. You'll see they're chock full, but we'll go through hiring and we'll talk about, how we fill these roles and where we look and what attributes we find and what best practices for attracting the right types of individuals for your managed IT services organization, and then how to onboard them, how to train them, how to develop them. We'll talk about third-party partners. Again, some of this you're going to build on your own, but just like you've got traditional relationships with, let's say, your office equipment manufacturer or ERS of choice, you're going to have a hand-in-glove relationship with some people. You're not going to build everything. Some people are going to build things on your behalf, and it's going to be very similar and analogous to what we do on the traditional side of the business. But we'll talk about some really reputable partners out there that our channel only, understand our office equipment channel in particular. In fact, many have built teams to help specifically support our channel because they're increasingly understanding both the nuances and especially the opportunity within this channel. So I've done the good work of kind of vetting some partners for you and things to look at as you move in or move forward or move through. And then we'll talk about MSP M&A. Again, it's something that I'm always getting calls about on behalf of dealers. I'm doing 5 active campaigns right now on the buy side for office equipment dealers looking for MSPs that they can integrate into their businesses. So a lot of curiosity always there. And then we're going to cover so much, and there's going to be so much to cover. I also wanted to give you a little bit of a blueprint for a strategy and implementation to help you execute. So those will be the 5 recorded sessions that you will have access to. And then after you get through those, I wanted to also provide an opportunity for an Ask Me Anything session. A couple of things. One, I'm recording this one today so you can get a little bit of an understanding of, who I am, my style, my approach. Hopefully it's kind of the right fit for you, but it might not be. But I'm only going to do the video on this one, so I'm not distracting on all the other ones. The other ones will just be audio. But on the Ask Me Anything session, I just wanted you to be able to, ask anything that maybe wasn't covered or was going to be specific, to your dealership. There's only a few things that I don't cover in these sessions. One of them is things that are, proprietary or that we've curated or developed on behalf of the consulting group. I need to be cognizant and respectful of my paid clients. So there's materials that we've developed that I won't give you, but I will give you an understanding of what they are and why, and give you some ideas on some things that you should do. I don't give out salary and pay and compensation information. I don't want to, start local battles on things because I don't know exactly who's going to be watching these things, but there's enough information out there, and I will share with you later some things as they relate to where you can get some studies and up-to-date information on those types of things, contracts like that. But there may be some things that are very specific to your dealership or to your situation. So I wanted to make sure at the end of this, you'll have the opportunity to schedule an Ask Me Anything session for anything that we might not have covered or you want to go deeper on. So a couple of sessions ago, I guess, so maybe in 2020, especially with it being kind of remote, and you're always a little challenged when you're trying to figure out who the audience is. How do you have this much material to a potentially wide audience? I came up with something that I thought was pretty clever, and frankly, it's been really well received. I've gotten great feedback on it. So throughout all those sessions, there will be a lot of sections. For instance, there'll be a section on pricing and packaging, let's say, or a session on sales process or list development. After each section, what I'll do is give some suggestions on what you should do with the information that I just covered. And then I've kind of sectioned it off, if you will, based on where you might be in the business today. These are not absolute numbers. We'll go through a lot of absolute numbers. There's enough actuary data out there that I've got a really good run rate on data. These are more kind of, more art than science, but I tried to, for the group, establish where you might be at the time. So some of you might be looking to join these workshops because you're thinking about getting in or you've just entered. So if you're in that bucket, there will be suggestions on what you should do with the material that I just covered if you're entering. If you've entered, and again, a little arbitrary, but entered here for the purposes of kind of thought and going forward, is if you've been in the business for maybe 12 or more months, but you haven't hit 30,000 in monthly recurring revenue. That's what the MRR stands for there. So you're in the business, but not materially in or significantly in. The last one you can see you're in. You've got dedicated resources and roles. You're generating more than 50,000 a month in MRR. Again, a little bit arbitrary, but I think it helps you get an understanding as we go through. If you're thinking about getting in or just entered, if you're entered, but you're looking for, how do I get to the next level? How do I round out some of the things? Maybe how do I jumpstart some of the items that I've got, or maybe I've gotten started, but maybe just not the momentum that I've hoped for. And then in is you're significantly in the business and you're really looking to drive it to scale, continue to grow, scale your operations, those types of things. So that's how each section will have a summary and actions. And then at the end of each session, I'll also summarize those for you as well. So again, there'll be a lot of content that we're covering, but I'm hoping to give you some color by numbers types of things for it. So the access to the recordings and the materials, once you sign up, you'll get an invitation to Dropbox. Each session will have a folder like you see on the right that corresponds to the content we went through. Within that folder, there will be the recorded session plus all of the supporting materials. As I'm going through the sessions, you'll see a box like this green one that will reference the source material on the right. So for instance, you'll see an example there. Item 12, managed IT staffing progression and partnered scenario. That's something I will reference during the session. And then you'll see a box like this pop up with a thumbnail of that document and say, go here in the Dropbox for more information on that, or the supporting information on that. So should be easy to navigate and easy to find for you. In all, there's going to be 5 recorded sessions, not counting this one. They're going to be 60 to 75 minutes each. You've probably already figured out I talk quickly, so we will move quickly. There's lots to cover. There's 178 slides. There's 38 supplemental tools and templates and materials. I really tried to, again, kind of curate on your behalf things that I've learned, things that others have learned. There's so much great support information that's kind of in the public domain today. There's a lot of groups that are creating great content for you, a lot of perspective that's out there. So I've tried to curate some of the best on your behalf, and hopefully you find a lot of value in it and in that. So as I mentioned, I cover a ton. There's a lot of support materials. The sessions are going to move quickly, but you can listen to them as often as you want. And you can have as many members of your dealership participate in this and access this as you'd like. You'll be able to download, the materials for your use. You can send me people's email addresses, and I'm happy to add them to the Dropbox for you. The information will be available for 90 days after registration. Again, you're going to be able to download what you need to download, all the resources and things like that. However, I'll just keep it open for 90 days. One ask of you, again, I'm putting a lot out there on your behalf. I've gotten great feedback on this for 13 years, and I'm doing this on behalf of the BTA and the channel, and they've been great supporters of me, and I've tried to be great supporters of them. There's a lot of intellectual property in here. Again, I'm not giving you anything that the consulting group has as proprietary, but there's a ton of good information in here. Again, a lot of it in the public domain that I didn't create, but a lot of it that I did. And so all I ask is that you be sensitive to that information and respectful for that, and I appreciate it in advance. So I hope you enjoy the sessions. I hope you are helped by the guidance. I hope you found value in this experience, and then I look forward to meeting you. Again, I was excited to put this out in in a recorded on demand type of scenario. I think it's time for the BTA to have that. So I was happy to have the opportunity to do it, but I will miss the interaction. Even when we did this as a remote session, there was a little bit of Q&A and those types of things. So I'll miss that, but I'll look forward to meeting you on the Ask Me Anything session. You'll see the overview on that once we get to it. And certainly if you run into any issues before or have any questions, or even if you're going through the session and there's something that you might want to have as an Ask Me Anything question, but you might want to ask it in advance, I'm here to help you. The success of the BTA channel and the community is very important to me. I've got three things as a consultant. I've got my time, I've got my knowledge, and I've got my integrity. I typically give away the first two and do everything I can to not jeopardize the third. So I want to see you be successful. I want this to be helpful to you, and I don't want to stand in your way for that. So if you have any questions or challenges as you are going through this, please don't hesitate to reach out. My contact information was at the beginning of this and will be at the end of this, and you would have received it when you received the link to this presentation. So I should be easy to find. All right. So I do want to transition just for a moment. Many of you are listening to this because you've already signed up. Some of you might be listening to this to find out if it's of value to you and really what it's going to be all about, and that's great. For both of you, what I wanted to do is put together a bit of information. So much of this we're going to go through the session, but for those of you that are going to be joining, I wanted to give you some perspective on some absolutes that we have learned through the industry today. And again, whether you're getting in, you've entered, or you're materially in, these numbers will be really helpful for you. And again, if you're just thinking about joining and wondering, what this is going to be all about, I wanted to at least give you a parting gift and again, some perspective on the types of things that I cover, my view on the market and the opportunity. So this is going to help either of you. So let's get through this. So the first thing is get to understand what your dealer's attitude towards managed IT services is or might be. Now, I don't seek to compartmentalize everything, but you can generalize a little bit. I've been in this since 2010, as I mentioned. So a lot of years, a lot of experience, a lot of interaction with hundreds of dealers, talk to dealers most of the day, every day. And, we can kind of probably group dealers into one of five categories today as it relates to managed IT services. And you can see them down there. And if you're listening to this, you're probably not in the far left column. You might be in the second item that you see there. What I would suggest is if you're in the second item, call me and let's have a conversation about not whether this workshop's right for you, but whether the business is even right for you, because this is significant. It isn't just something that you can kind of put on your website as another offering to pitch, or something that when you go to BTA events, you can say, I'm in managed services business as well. It's going to take some discipline. It's going to take some dedication. It's going to take some effort. Those of you that are old enough to remember kind of the analog to digital transition and the decision that needed to be made, it's similar to that, maybe even more significant. If you're going to get into this business at all, it kind of needs to be in a material way. It needs to be in a significant way. So if you're on the left, you're probably not here anyway. So the audience that we'll be addressing are over here to the right. And I think all of these are appropriate. Managed IT services can help you do any of these things. My phone started ringing a heck of a lot more. It already rang a lot. It rang a lot more kind of post-COVID. There was a lot of dealers who were now interested in getting into managed IT. Some maybe begrudgingly, some maybe were in that second box and recognized that they needed to try and move towards the right as click volume was going down and profits were going down and those types of things. So, but others were early adopters or very intentional when they got in, even if they were late adopters, and really want it to be a significant portion of the future of their business, whether it's 20 to 30 or 30 to 50%, which is what most of my client group is seeking. And the client group I work with at any given time is 12 to 16 geographically independent office equipment dealers who are going to market similarly in the same way, same kind of attitude, same thoughts, same structures, same desires, those types of things. So that's most of the market today that's materially in, and others. And I've got clients that look like this. I know dealerships that are all the way on the far right. And I don't mean to generalize by sex here. This could be, my child doesn't want to run their fathers or mothers or grandfathers or grandmothers, but it's usually fathers, as we all know, copier company. They recognize it's a different world. They want it to be a different world. They want it to be a different business. We're not going to burn the boats on office equipment. It built my career and income and earnings for a long time, and it still does. So I am dedicated, like I said, to the support of the channel and the entire office equipment dealer. Now I just have a heavy focus on managed IT services. So if you're here, you're probably in one of these three categories over to the right, and welcome. And the reason I bring that up is you kind of have that kind of perspective, or need to have that kind of perspective or intention to understand the 8 numbers that I'm now going to give you. So the first one is 100%. And I don't mean to speak in hyperbole, but this number is accurate. All right. And what this 100% number represents is the percentage of office equipment dealers that have entered into managed IT, that have come before you, that have told me they had wished they had been more disciplined to their target market and their tech stack adherence from the beginning. So let me kind of define these for you. What's target market mean? Target market is ideal client profile. And we're going to get into this a lot in the session 1 and session 3 in particular. We're going to talk about ideal client profile. There is kind of a critical mass ideal customer type profile for the consumption of managed services today. But it doesn't mean it has to be yours. You can be slightly below that. You can be slightly above that. Above it is kind of co-managed or enterprise. Below it is a little smaller businesses, micro businesses. Any of them are fine. You can make a good business for any of them. The challenge is when you try and do all of them. The analogy here for you is, think about office equipment. We're selling copiers, we're selling printers, everything great. And then we bring production print into the environment. So on the surface, you're like, hey, it's just faster and more volume and a bigger machine and more zeros on it. So it's great. Let's go sell that. But quickly you learned that experiences and expectations are different in the production environment. You might have had to dedicate a tech or two. Availability of parts needed to be different. SLA levels for service needed to be different. You maybe even needed to change your contract language a little bit, because now we're single clicking 11/17 as an example, or something like that. We probably had to learn some different technology to be able to support those as it related to variable data print or print streams or RIPs and all these types of things. The point is, even though it was still putting dots on paper, it was different. There was a different expectation in that environment, and you kind of had to build that business, and you had to build it slightly differently than supporting the traditional 1 or 2 copiers or 3 or 4 copiers even, or a copier and a fax machine out in the general population. If you try and do the same thing with managed services, especially as you start, and you try and service enterprise or co-managed or a market here and also a market here, it becomes very difficult. There's different expectations, there's different resources, sometimes there's different products that are needed, there's different SLAs. So pick a ideal client profile that works for you. And again, we'll cover that in the sessions, what that looks like and what that means. Another word you'll hear a lot is called tech stack. That's essentially what you're selling. And the point here is, again, analogous with the office equipment space. If you support manufacturer A and you've built your business heavily around manufacturer A, or maybe even A and B, you've got 2 primary output device relationships. That's typical, that's fine, that's great. But if you start trying to pick up clients with a 3rd or a 4th or a 5th or a 6th line that you don't support, again, we don't have what's called stack adherence, and we're trying to do one-off things. And it's not like we can't service them. It's just more difficult to service them or find parts or certify technicians and those types of things. So 100% of the people that have come before you had wished they had been more disciplined to both of those things as they've gotten started. The second number I want to give you is 50. Now this is 50 plus, and this might be one of the most important numbers in the whole package here. But what this 50 represents is the head start in years of copier service and copier service confidence and understanding that, frankly, the bullpen has over this IT services. So what do I mean by that? You walk up to any copier rep and you say, hey, tell me about your service organization. And they know average response time, what error codes are generated, who goes out and services and supports the machine, how many certifications they have, what their tenure is, how many parts they have in their car, and how much we have in inventory, and what happens when there's a jam or toner needs to be replaced. They have a lot of confidence in how service is delivered. They don't have that same understanding as they get started. And shockingly, they often don't have that same understanding even once you've gotten started. I've got a lot of organizations that are running significant managed IT services businesses within the business, but the reps don't have this same level of confidence or understanding or metrics and awareness. Make them aware as soon as possible, because frankly, the technology is going to make it such that we can actually ultimately deliver better, faster, more proactive service here than we do on the copier. It's just they often don't know it. So one of the challenges as you get started is you've got to close that 50-year gap as quickly as possible. We've got to get confidence in managed IT services delivery and an understanding of what we deliver up to the speed of what the organization has on the copier side. So your second number is 50 plus. In fact, I've got a client that's celebrating their 75th anniversary today. So that's why it's 50 plus. All right. I don't know what time of day you might be watching this, but hopefully you're ready for an equation. Well, algebra here, I guess. And what this is basically telling us is, half is less than a half, or X is always X minus something. And the point here is it's illustrating that non-dedicated resources or fractional resources in this business are going to give fractional results. And I know this is difficult. This was particularly more beneficial for early adopters when we had more profit being spun off on the traditional business, kind of the cash cow of the traditional business, if you will, allowing us to fund this new business venture of managed IT. So I know in today's environment with costs and people shortages and labor and whatnot, that it's not easy financially to dedicate resources, but you've got to dedicate resources as quickly as possible. If we have someone, I'll give you a good example. I worked with a client one time who had a very capable kind of service manager that was also supporting or doing the VCIO role, but was also the primary guy for any large print implementations that they had or enterprise things, and was always also the go-to guy on connectivity and scanning and that type of stuff. So they're trying to build this managed IT services business, and this guy was essentially the kink in the hose. Not that he wasn't well-intended, but every time something came up on the copier side of the business, they had to stop moving forward with the managed IT services portion of the business. So fractional resources are going to give you fractional results. So try and dedicate as quickly as possible. And like I said, I understand the financial implication of that. You can do some shared resources things. You can do some things as you get going, but just understand your timeline and results might be negatively impacted because of it. Okay. So the next one. Less or greater than or equal to 1, greater than or equal to 1. And what this is when we're talking about dedicated resources, and we're going to talk a ton about this VCIO and VCIO role when we get into session 3 of the workshop, but we need to dedicate in particular a VCIO. This VCIO is likely going to be the most important hire that you make for your managed IT services business, and it's likely going to be someone who comes from outside of the organization. Again, it's not that you don't have somebody that's inside, but we'll talk in the session about why that might not be advantageous to you for a number of reasons. But we're going to have to get one of these. They are rare, but they're not unicorns. We can find them. They do exist. We're going to go through a lot of attributes, but understand that you're going to have one of these when they start. They're likely going to be your program builder. As they move forward and you get to market, they're going to help establish a lot of credibility. And then once you've gotten to market, they're going to be the ones responsible for kind of the care and feeding of the account, not from hopefully a service delivery side, but a strategic trusted advisor side. So they're going to have a lot of roles, a lot of responsibility, and we're going to talk a lot about this, but you're going to have to find at least one as you move into the business. The next one here, get you 2 numbers, 70% and 3. So this is probably going to be very interesting for you, because most of the dealers I talk to when they start the business, they're like, oh, okay, great. I'm going to have I got all my current office equipment accounts, and I'm going to go sell this to 50% of them, and we'll have a great business. And what you actually find is about 70% of your initial contracts are going to be sold to non-copier customers. Now, a little bit of good news about this. Those are net new logos that you go get. And I don't have the exact number on this for my client group, but it's well over 85% of managed services clients ultimately end up buying copiers and other stuff for you. So that's great. But it's really more of an indication of something I talked about, that 50 plus number on the second number that I gave you, It usually starts out where we're selling to net new because the copier reps don't have a lot of confidence, so they're not necessarily taking this to their good relationships, right? So let's talk about, again, the 3 reasons why. There's the first one, rep confidence. You're going to ask them to go generate leads. You're going to ask them to go introduce this to their best relationships and accounts, and they're going to be a little bit concerned about doing that until they prove that we're not going to screw up the relationship. But even once we do, oftentimes what we find is we're at the wrong level of contact. We'll talk a lot about this when we get into the sales section, but who we're going to sell this to is likely a different person than we've been selling our copier to. Sometimes that's actually internal IT. Oftentimes it's purchasing or administration, but it's essentially just the wrong level of contact. And it's not that we can't learn to navigate around that or learn to navigate through that. Again, things we'll talk about in the 4th session, but we likely start at the wrong level of contact. So sometimes we just don't get traction, we don't get interest, or we hear a no from somebody that we really shouldn't be taking a no from. So that's the second reason why it's usually 70%. And then let me help you understand this math. So the reason I started with that 100% number in the ICP is you got to get an understanding of only about 10 or 20% of your current copier accounts are going to fit into your ideal client profile. So let me, again, help you with the math with that. Let's say, for instance, you decide that you want to go to accounts that are going to have 20 to 75 computer users. Well, anybody that's under 20 is not a fit. Anybody that's over 75 is not a fit. So that's immediately going to take probably 50% or 2/3 of the client base out. And then you're probably also going to want to look anybody that's, let's say, in a business that is open hours different than you, retail, restaurants, those types of things. Unless you want to build an organization that's going to provide 24/7 support or need to have on site, those kinds of things. There might be target markets that you don't want to go after. We certainly know that there's verticals that do make sense and don't make sense. The point being is, if you stay dedicated to that first number that I described for you, which is we're going to have a primary target market, we're likely going to eliminate much of the copier base, again, which is fine. Let's say you've got a school district or a hospital. Unless you're looking to sell to those types of environments, they're just not going to be in the client base. So none of these things are problems unless we don't understand how to address them. So 70 and 30 is your number there. 300. We're going to talk about this exhaustively and for good reason. So 300 is essentially the size and an appropriate territory list for a managed services sales specialist or a team. So it should have 300 businesses that fit into your ICP, that we understand the level of contact, we understand what their current IT support structure is, we understand what their current, contract or financial situation might be. And within that 300, we want to make sure that we've got a little bit of a vertical focus. And again, we'll talk about why that's important. The math behind this 300, and this 300 number is a number we've been running within the consultancy for a number of years, and it's been accurate, is if you've got 300 businesses, you can assume that about 1/3 of them each year are either going to have an event or have a contract that comes up for renewal. An event could be somebody just didn't fulfill the service and they're frustrated, or their favorite tech left, or their prices went up, or they were asked to do something they didn't want to do, or they're just not getting the love, or maybe their MSP was acquired. There's a lot of that going on. But the idea is about 1/3 of that list is probably going to have a decision or an event. And if you're nurturing them well enough, you should be able to get into 50% of those sales cycles. And if you've got a sales process like we do that wins greater than 50% of the time, that gets you 25 deals a year, and most copier dealers are building their pro formas for 2 new managed services wins a month. So the math makes sense, right? So the 300 list is what you should be thinking about, and we're going to talk a lot about this as well. I'm on the record. We've got a sales process that works. The sales process is increasingly defined here, not just from me, from others, but nurturing these prospects is what's really important. And you'll see that here in a moment with maybe even the next number after this. So once you have that 300 list, the next most important numbers for you are 16 and 2.4. And this is a ratio. And this ratio has actually come down over time. And I've got some members of the client group that are really tenured, really disciplined about driving their 300 lists. And their numbers are actually about 12 to 2.4, 12 to 14 to 2.4. But the point is, It's the amount of initial monthly appointments that your dedicated managed services sales specialist or office equipment led lead generation needs to generate per month over time to yield 2.4 deals per month. So again, 16 initial appointments with decision makers in your ICP within your target market will yield over time 2.4 deals. If you only get 8, you're only going to get 1 deal. I mean, we've seen that number repeat over and over and over and over and over again. So when you're thinking about how to generate opportunity, and you're going to have maybe the office equipment reps participate in some, and a dedicated managed services sales rep participate in some, and maybe you've even gotten outsourced, telemarketing, or you're using automated marketing or those types of things. Figure out what percentage is going to come from each one of those buckets, but you got to drive towards 16, especially as you get started. So 16 to 2.4. And then this number here, whoops, got a little excited with the mouse. Greater than 12 and less than 60. So this is why nurturing is important, as I mentioned before. And we're seeing this increasingly happen, especially as we've gotten more disciplined to nurturing and better at nurturing that list. The first thing I want to tell you is I often hear that managed services sales cycles are too long. What I would tell you is they're probably shorter than office equipment sales cycles. And what I mean by that is, let's say you walk into a net new account and, you say, hi, I'm Chris, I'm with ABC Company. I'd like to talk to you about copiers. And they say, just 2 months ago, we signed a new 5-year lease with your competitor. Well, that's a really long sales cycle. At best, I can wait for the buyout to go down, but that's a long sales cycle. Now, granted, it's not a sales cycle, but we see kind of similar here, and we're compared to that. Managed IT is actually quite a bit quicker. Your initial contact might be greater than 12 months. Hi, I'm Chris. We're providing IT services now. I wanted to talk to you about it. That's great. We've got an internal IT person, or we've got an outsourced partner that we'd like. That's okay. I just wanted to let you know we exist in case you ever needed it. And then what happens is you nurture that over time, and then that event happens. And what we're seeing is oftentimes that initial conversation is greater than 12 months, but the sales cycle is way less than 60 days. They don't need you until they need you, but when they need you fast, and they have to remember that you're delivering these services so you can go in and help them, right? So greater than 12 and less than 60, we have to understand that from a pace perspective. All right, so that's the 8 numbers. There's the summary of them in the middle. Again, I'm Chris Ryan. I'm looking forward to your participation in this. I'm looking forward to meeting you. I hope you find a tremendous amount of value in the sessions. I hope you found a little value in this. And again, got to know a little bit about me, how I'm going to present, the types of things that we're going to cover. So if you've already registered, you'll either be receiving a Dropbox invitation or you may have already received that Dropbox invitation. So make sure you've got access to that. Again, it's on demand. You can do anything you want. You can listen to them. They're all Zoom recorded sessions, so you can listen to them in the car, although you'll probably want to see the slides a little bit. You've got all the supplemental materials that'll be there for you. And then I look forward to the Ask Me Anything session once you get through those. And again, that's something you can invite your whole team to. You can aggregate questions and send them to me in advance. We'll cover that in the sessions once we get to them, kind of for administering that. If you're just considering participating and you have more questions after this, please feel free to reach out to me. There's my contact information on the left. Again, I'm here to help the channel. I'm here to help you. And I look forward to doing that. So thank you for joining this. Thank you for the time today, and all the best to you.